Hello and welcome to this World Anvil video, where today we're looking at military conflicts. Now, if you think that military conflicts have no place in your world in terms of world building, I think you need to reflect on the fact that we as a society here on Earth refer to military conflicts that date back thousands of years. That's how important they are to us as a culture, is that we literally can talk about the Battle of Thermopylae, the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of the Bulge, all of these very, very important battles that have taken place in human history that have arguably shaped human history. So military conflict is a template that you should look at if you want to create this really dynamic world setting, because military conflicts generally are when things change. If we look at the Battle of Waterloo, how did that influence the entire continent of Europe? How did that position Napoleon Bonaparte? How did that position the British Empire after that battle? That's one particular battle. Look at the Battle of Trafalgar. Suddenly the Spanish go from being this incredible superpower on the ocean waters to being defeated. Now, those are significant milestones in European history, and they are very, very important. So we see the template says battles, wars, sieges, skirmishes, generally what happens when two sides meet each other with pointy sticks. And that, sadly, is still the case today. It might just be drones that are flying around and dropping things on top of each other. So again, the template is remarkably complete. You've got your start date, you've got your end date, you've got your prelude, you've got your deployment, you've got your battlefield, the conditions under which it happened. Now, this might seem to be too much for you to add into your world. Who cares about a specific battle? Who cares about this? Well, yes and no. If you have a bunch of warriors who are talking about past battles and things, this is great flavoring to add in to make it feel as if it's come alive. But more importantly, adding in these conflicts gives you, the creator, a sense of how your world has evolved and grown and changed, and it allows you to really get a good sense of the space. If we look at, say, the Roman Empire and the great battles that the Romans fought against the Gauls, for example, no particular name springs to mind because there were so many of them, but there was a siege that was particularly dark, where Caesar's troops surrounded a Gaulish village. The Gauls refused to surrender to the siege, but they started to run out of food. So what did they do? They kicked all the men, the old men, the women, the children, those who were not contributing to the defense of their city. They kicked them out of the main gates, hoping that the Romans would allow them through and to be gone because they're not combatants. The Romans, in their steely resolve to take over all of Gaul, they refused to allow the people to come closer. So what happened? They went back towards the city, but the city refused to take them in as well. And tragically, they were slaughtered to the last, because they were literally stuck between the Roman army and a Gaulish city encampment that refused to give up. Ultimately, that city encampment did give up. In the end, they ran out of food and the Romans won. Now, that's because of the way that the Roman army used to work. So this is one conflict that just has this amazing repercussion. And then you look at the effects thereafter. Vercingetorix, the great Gaulish chief, was eventually captured by the Romans and publicly executed in the streets of Rome in front of Caesar himself. And it really brought the Gaulish question to a conclusion. The German problem was another one. The Germanic tribes was a problem that would remain forever. So these conflicts, they're amazing in terms of creating these wonderful spaces. Now, let's look at repercussions. What's the outcome? What's the short term? What's the long term? We simply have to look at World War I here on Earth to say, well, what were the outcomes? What was the repercussions? Germany went into a complete depression. The rest of Europe started to try and form this European Union to protect against this kind of thing from happening. And of course, it also led up to World War II 40 years later, or 30 years later, as a matter of fact. So this idea of these battles and this conflict not being of value to you, it's absolutely integral to creating a real world space, the idea behind it, what literature has been written about it. And we've got TV series, we've got movies, we've got books that have all been written on these great moments, or tragic moments, as in the case of the Battle of Gallipoli, for example. So there are a lot of things that you can add in that just bring it to life. So if you look at conflict type, you've got things like war, military, base, siege, battle, skirmish. Skirmishes themselves can be important. A lot of battles hung around that skirmish point. They were absolutely critical. My own home country, we had a battle, the Battle of Spionkop, which was a battle between the British forces and the farmer forces, and involved in that one battle was Winston Churchill, Mohammedas Gandhi, and General Smith. Now, General Smith was critically important to South Africa in terms of how South Africa involved and about bringing about apartheid and that sort of thing. Churchill, of course, was involved in Europe and in England, and of course the battle, World War II and World War I, and all those kinds of wonderful things. And Gandhi, of course, was absolutely instrumental in India gaining its independence. This is all post the Boer War. Now, at that one battle, there is a moment where all three of them could quite possibly have been standing no more than 100 yards apart from each other. Imagine if one of them had died in that battle. That would have changed the course of history forever, and it would have completely changed the outcome of 3 or 4 or 5 decades worth of history thereafter. So these kinds of information, these kinds of details you can add in. And later on, you can go and explore it. Imagine if your characters somehow time-port back to one of these famous battles that you've set up because you've created it. You've set it up in your game, you've set it up in your book, in your story, that it has occurred, it was something that was important. Now the characters suddenly go back in time and they're in that actual battle that they've only heard about and kind of encountered in brief passing here and there. It's a great opportunity to make your world feel absolutely rich, absolutely alive, and to give it a sense that it changes and it adjusts. It's not this ancient static place. There really is a development, there really is a progression of cultures as one culture flourishes and then another one collapses and another one rises, and so on and so on. So it's a really worthwhile template to have a look at and to invest some time in to actually push forward and to make it your own. Anyway, until next time, light up the forge.